A warm welcome to all the foundrymen who have joined us with this webinar. This is our very first webinar on technical discussions. This is NAM webinar 1, and this discussion and this webinar will be about the constituents of a nodalizer in ductile iron and its significances. And in this pandemic condition, we are very happy that we have got these many customers and these many of our foundrymen who have stepped forward to join us with this webinar for learning. And we are happy that this online platform tool have helped us to communicate and connect with our customers during this pandemic condition. So let us get into the webinar. So this presentation will be discussing about an introduction about ductile iron, like what is ductile iron and why is it selected, and we'll talk about what is a nodalizer, introduction to a nodalizer, and what is the role of a nodalizer in ductile iron manufacture. And as and when the presentation goes on, I'll explain you what is light master alloy, and this will be discussing about its constituents and its functions. So what are the significance of every individual constituent in a light master alloy will be seeing, and we'll also be discussing about how magnesium supports nucleation. So what is the effect of magnesium over nucleation, and why do we need to do inoculation? So this is one of the major question which would be in the minds of foundrymen. So we'll be discussing on why do we need to do nucleation or inoculation, and we'll be briefly discussing about the nucleation and growth mechanisms in ductile iron, a theory which talks about the nucleation growth mechanisms in relation to the nodalizer alloys and individual elements. And we'll be briefly going through what are the general misconceptions, or we'll say some understandings upon which the selection or use of nodalizers are being done existing. So we'll touch on it. And what are the limitations of magnesium content, and why, to what extent you can increase your magnesium content, and why do you want to increase? We'll be discussing about those things. And we'll be going through general guidelines for nodalizer selection. So based on the process parameters what you have in your foundry, so on how to select magnesium treatment alloy for your ductile iron production. So we'll be going through a small case study which we have come out with the experiments conducted at our R&D center, and some data from our customers also, where we'll be comparing if performance of different nodalizers based on the above parameters which we discussed. So what is ductile iron? So from the name by itself means this is a family of iron which has got very good ductility. So ductile iron is also called as ductile cast iron, which falls under a part of cast iron family, which has got the graphite in spheroidal shape. So it can also be called as spheroidal graphite iron or nodular cast iron. So it was invented in 1943 by Keith Millis, and this was completely a pure accident. It was not intentionally to be produced as ductile iron, but the iron which they were experimenting came out as ductile iron, giving good and beautiful properties. So here the graphite is in the form of spherical nodules or round nodules rather than flakes, which is the morphology of graphite in grey cast iron, which is previous to this in the iron family. Graphite nodules, which is round in shape, spherical in 3 dimension, inhibit the crack initiation and propagation. So the cracks which get initiated will be stopped by this presence of round nodules, or it doesn't let the crack to initiate in the casting. So this way, this entire morphology in the round graphite structure gives added strength to the cast iron. So this way, this ductile iron has got a better strength than the grey cast iron when we compare 1 to 1. So because of this, you get the matrix, and you get the ductility also because of this round nodules present. So this morphology of graphite, round or spherical nodules, will give good strength and good ductility to the cast iron. Why do we need to have ductile iron? Why ductile iron? Why don't just grey cast iron, which is already existing? So when you compare the equivalent strengths, the malleable iron and steel the manufacturing cost of malleable iron and steel with respect to ductile iron for the similar strength grades is lesser with ductile iron. So the major advantage is cost. So you can manufacture this material for the required strength at a lower cost. So here the manufacturability, when we talk, see, we'll be talking of risering, and gating system and risering plays a major role, which talks of the yield of the casting. So for the same strength requirement to cast the same component or a similar component, you need to riser, you need to method malleable iron and steel heavily such that the yield of those castings are less. But comparatively, ductile iron can be cast with a lesser yield. That means these round nodules will expand and fill the voids which is formed during the solidification. That means the liquid to solid transformation. So this graphitization present in the ductile iron helps to reduce the riser requirements of the casting. So as we discussed, ductile iron gives good strength and toughness when compared to grey cast iron. So this is better than grey cast iron in respect to toughness requirements. And with expertise in methoding, there are people who still do riserless castings. Like you can get the maximum yield out of ductile iron. So there is no need that ductile iron should have a riser. So when you have a good control of your liquid metal and you have good control of your methoding principles, then you can actually cast riserless ductile iron, which is generally not possible with steel or malleable iron. So where does ductile iron find its application? Ductile iron is almost one of the major engineering application element material. So ductile iron is predominantly used in automotive. It is present in wind power industry also, where you see these bigger hubs are made out of ductile iron. You've got pipe industries, DI pipe plants all over India and abroad, which transports different materials. So those are made of ductile iron. And you've got textile industries and agriculture based industries also have castings from made out of ductile iron. And one special application is that which we went across looking into the application. This particular musical instrument, piano, harp, is made out of ductile iron. So this is the functionality, and then where ductile iron finds its place in the engineering industry. So when we talk of nodalizers, so the textbook explanation is nodalizer is a material or a compound which when added to liquid cast iron helps in altering the morphology of the graphite precipitate. So the graphite is somehow going to get precipitated from liquid iron. So you have this nodalizer material added to your metal such that you change the shape of the precipitating graphite to the required. Like for ductile iron, we want round nodules. So we add this nodalizer to turn the graphite precipitating into a round nodule, into spheroids. So without this nodalizer, getting this roundness in the graphite throughout the matrix or throughout the casting might be difficult. So we can exclusively tell that without a nodalizer, you cannot produce uniform ductile iron throughout. So we'll talk of the top common types of nodalizers. So what are all the general types of nodalizers available? So you've got pure magnesium, just the element magnesium, which is 99.9% pure magnesium as a nodalizer, because magnesium is one of the primary nodalizing element. Then comes the heavy master alloys. The name by itself talks of heavy master alloys, which has got heavy metals in it. There are varieties like nickel magnesium and copper magnesium, where nickel and copper gets added alloying to the magnesium. So this increases the density of the material, which weighs heavier than the pure magnesium material. So these are used in particular applications where these paralytic ions are made completely throughout. And then comes light master alloy. Light master alloy means it has got lighter elements added to it in place of the heavier elements. So here you have iron as the basic material which gives the strength. It has got silicon, aluminum, calcium, and then some rare earth elements added to it for the functionality requirements. So the difference between all these three is the first one has got just the magnesium, the second one has got magnesium with the heavy metal, and the third one has got the magnesium with iron plus lighter elements present in it. So we'll see how these materials are being used in foundries. So there are various forms of nodalizers available. So these the above mentioned three materials can be used in any of these following forms. So in the form of lumps. Lumps are generally designated as like say anything about 25 mm, 25 mm to 100 mm in size. It's coarser in shape. And then comes granules. Granules are generally broken down pieces of lumps. So it will be ranging starting from 1 mm up to say 20 mm or 25 mm, ranging from 5 mm, 10 mm, 15 and 25 mm. Then comes the code wire. Code wire is a patented process where you have got a steel sheath inside which you have got the fine powders or finer size of the nodalizing element stuffed inside it. So this is a patented process where you have feeding machine which feeds the amount of required material into the ladle. So there is a separate mechanism along with the process, and it comes with the setup by itself. And the other fourth one is the pressed pellet. So here again you use the fine powders or finer size of the above any of the above nodalizers, and you make it in the proper shape and you press it in the form of a pellet. It's either sintered or unsintered, but compressed with the powders to give the functionality. Again, the first, second, and the fourth materials are added directly into the treatment ladle, and the third material, the code wire type technology, is immersed or plunged into the liquid iron. So these are the four ways in which the above three nodalizers like pure magnesium or heavy master or light master alloys are being used in the foundry industry. So let us go into how nodalizers work. What is the role of a nodalizer in ductile iron foundry? So the nodalizers are added for the following purposes. You have to actually deoxidize and desulfurize your metal. So oxygen and sulfur, to some extent, we say yes, those are nucleating elements. It helps in nucleation, but excess of these two are dangerous. So and also you have got nodalizer. Your nodalizers have got element which has got affinity towards oxygen and sulfur. So your nodalizer should uh, help in deoxidizing and desulfurizing the metal, also not let magnesium get lost. So your nodalizing elements or alloy composition should be such that you should prevent magnesium getting lost due to deoxidation or desulfurization. Then reduce reaction violence. So magnesium is a low melting point element and a lighter element too. Magnesium, when it comes in contact with oxygen and sulfur at a very high temperature, starts becoming gases and start escaping. So when this reaction happens, it starts bubbling, or it starts increasing the entropy and the violence of the treatment. So it starts giving away lot of fumes, and then metal starts splashing out. So reaction violence is a dangerous thing for operations as well as on the metallurgical front. So reaction violence due to magnesium treatment is to be reduced. To promote graphite periodization. So that is the ultimate functionality of a nodalizer. The aim of nodalizer is to give maximum or 100% periodization. So you add magnesium, or you add any form of new nodalizer to your ductile iron metal, base metal. It should ensure that all the graphite present in the metal should get converted into spheroids. To neutralize ill effects of impurities. There are certain elements in your liquid metal which come along with your charge materials, which can be impurities also. So these impurities contain elements which affect the graphite morphology. Ultimately, we want a round nodule. So if any of these elements which alter this or damages this roundness is called as ill tramp elements, and elements like arsenic, antimony, these kind of elements have got ill effects, like it destroys the roundness. So your nodalizer design should contain elements which can counter this ill effects. So your nodalizer should reduce the ill effects. To control the matrix structure, as we have discussed previously, the heavy master alloys which contain, example like copper magnesium alloy which contains copper, can have impact on your perlite content in your casting. So to some extent, nodalizers can also control your matrix. So your nodalizer should deoxidize and desulfurize metal, but prevent magnesium loss, reduce the reaction violence, promote 100% spheroidization or the maximum spheroidization, neutralize the ill effects or bad effects of the tramp elements present in your metal, and to control the matrix structure finally. So we'll be discussing more into the Lightmaster alloy category, which is generally ferrosilicon based. So the major nodalizing elements present in this ferrosilicon based Lightmaster alloy is magnesium, and you have got other elements like silicon, calcium, rare earth. This is a family name of group of elements. Especially cerium and lanthanum gets added to this Lightmaster alloy. These elements support magnesium in its performance. So these elements in different combinations form different variants, which is suitable or which is opted by different foundries for their process. So the basic constituents of a nodalizer. From now on, we'll be discussing about light master alloy. So we'll be dealing more into the iron, silicon, magnesium, calcium, aluminum um, alloys. So the first element is magnesium. Magnesium is the major nodalizing element. So the purpose of magnesium is to produce good ductile ion. So magnesium is an element which has got good affinity towards oxygen and sulfur. So these forms oxysulfide complex compounds and silicate compounds in the liquid metal. As these elements are present, magnesium has got good affinity. It reacts and forms these compounds, and these are to some extent responsible for making the round nodules out of the graphite which is precipitating. So the carbon comes from your liquid metal, your magnesium takes care of converting it into roundness. Then comes calcium. Calcium is a good deoxidizer. Calcium oxidizes faster than magnesium. So we'll be going into the details later. So this is kind of a sacrificial element. Calcium separately doesn't have a nodalizing effect, but it supports magnesium in nodalizing effect. So calcium helps in preventing magnesium getting lost. So this way calcium makes more magnesium available for the entire process. Rare earths generally cerium and lanthanum. These two elements have got good affinity towards oxygen and more affinity towards sulfur. And this also aims in magnesium for nodalization. So when you see cerium, lanthanum, calcium are adding effects to the magnesium. So these help that magnesium doesn't get lost in the form of oxides or in the form of sulfides. Also, the special quality of these cerium and lanthanum is that cerium and lanthanum possess nucleating potential also. So these can also work as a supporting element as nodalizer, also can work like a inocculating element. Cerium and lanthanum also has got a special quality that these elements have a good reactivity with these subversive elements or the tramp elements which I was discussing previously. So these elements which have got ill effects will react with cerium and lanthanum, form compounds which is stable, which doesn't react further with the graphite or the magnesium which is present. So the ill effects is taken care by the cerium and lanthanum. Then comes silicon. Silicon is also a deoxidizer. As we know, silicon forms silicon oxide. Silicon is the carrier element for the nucleus. So silicon is an important element for the nucleation process to happen. Silicon is also a ferrite promoting element. To some extent, silicon also controls the matrix. And as silicon is a nucleating element, magnesium is known for its carbide promoting tendency. So we have silicon in the nodalizing material such that the carbide formation tendency is compensated by silicon present. So in your nodalizer, you have an element which is prone to give carbides. You also have an element which gives nucleation. So these two are compensated by itself. Then comes aluminum. Aluminum is a better deoxidizer. As we know, aluminum forms aluminum oxide, and the same way it avoids magnesium getting lost as magnesium oxide. And losses due to oxidation of magnesium is reduced. And aluminum also has got nucleating effects similar to silicon. So, but there is a catch that aluminum in excess can lead to some other defects. So, defects like pinhole formation in the castings. So, care to be taken that the amount of aluminum required in the casting to be finalized, and accordingly the alloy selection to be done. Then comes iron. So, iron gives the strength or structure to this entire system. So leaving out iron, all the other elements are lighter in nature, lesser density than your cast iron. So when you just have an alloying material with just these lighter elements, it starts floating. So unless you add iron, you don't get the required strength or required retention of this alloy inside the liquid metal. When you add iron, it gives density and the density increases. And also when you add iron, your melting point of the material is controlled. So this way, when you see the constituents other than magnesium, all other elements support in the functionality of magnesium. Why do we need to have rare earths? From this slide, we'll be talking about why do you want a rare earth in your nodalizer. So TRE, as I explained, it's a group of elements like cerium, lanthanum, and cerium is the most reactive element to sulfur than magnesium. So you don't let magnesium easily react with sulfur. Cerium and lanthanum can help in avoiding formation of vermiculite graphite. So when your magnesium amount present is more, you get the best nodularity and your vermiculite graphite production is reduced. So this way cerium and lanthanum helps in directly giving good nodularity. cerium and lanthanum has got both nodalization, graphite nucleation potential. So cerium and lanthanum can also work as an inoculating element. So it is good to have cerium and lanthanum in your nodalizers. And cerium and lanthanum improves nodule count, as if the nucleation is better, so it does improve your nodule count, which can counter the defects like carbide formation or microshrinkage in the casting. Compounds formed by cerium and lanthanum have higher melting points and hence stable. So we need to have compounds which is stable in our operating conditions, like our pouring temperatures, our melting temperatures are around 1550, 1560, our pouring temperatures will be around 1400 or so. So we need to have compounds formed by the elements present such that it is stable for the entire pouring area, entire pouring time, sorry. So cerium and lanthanum forms compounds which is stable, and hence it has got a less fading tendency than magnesium, because magnesium, the compounds formed by magnesium have got a tendency for dissociating because it is less stable. Cerium lanthanum does not fade as much as magnesium. Cerium and lanthanum form subversive elements, like compounds with subversive elements like this antimony, arsenic, and convert them into heterogeneous nuclei, which helps in graphitization. So cerium reacts with the ill elements and converts it into a useful compound. So that is the purpose of having TRE, and it forms oxides and sulfides which supplements magnesium. And there is a catch that TRE doesn't fade. So when it doesn't fade, it keeps increasing as and when you keep adding returns again and again to your liquid metal. So care to be taken that this increase in TRE doesn't affect your casting. So the level of TRE to be selected in your nodalizer should be based on the type of castings we manufacture and the layout, the foundry process control also. So the Ellingham diagram, which talks of the potency or the free energy of formation of different compounds. This will tell which element forms the compound first. So when we talk of just sulfide, when the free energy is lesser, that is the most favorable reaction to occur. So when you see these two graphs, and I have just plotted, I have taken the approximate value from the graph. So when you compare cerium and magnesium, cerium has got a lower free energy than magnesium to form sulfide. So this means that when you have cerium, magnesium and sulfur in your metal, cerium is the first element reacting with sulfur to form cerium sulfide. So this is how cerium helps in safeguarding magnesium. So these values are taken at a typical temperature like 1537, which is closer to our melting conditions, like the tapping temperature of our conventional ductile iron. So why do we need to have calcium? So calcium is a protective element. It is like a sacrificial element which is added to the nodalizer. It oxidizes faster than magnesium, hence magnesium loss is reduced, and it reduces the reaction violence. So the reaction violence is caused because of magnesium getting oxidized, magnesium becoming vapor. So when you reduce the oxidation by adding an element like calcium, your reaction violence comes down. So you get a safer and a good magnesium treatment. So the dross or the slag which is formed by calcium is easily removable. So the wettability, the compatibility or the wettability between the slag and the liquid metal is lesser, such that you can easily remove the slag or dross formed due to excess calcium without or with less efforts. So calcium also to some extent helps in nucleation and graphite precipitation. Calcium is not a strong nucleating element, but it is a supporting element. As it supports in nodalizer, it supports in the nucleation front also. So this is Ellingham diagram for oxide formation. As we had seen for sulfur previously, this is similar to it. So when you compare these two graphs, and I have taken data out of it, when you see calcium and magnesium are closer, but still calcium forms oxide first. So these are approximate values. The values are taken at the similar or typical temperature like 1537 degrees Celsius. So now we'll be discussing about how magnesium supports or magnesium treatment supports nucleation. Magnesium treatment does not provide any potent nucleation sites on its own, like it doesn't provide directly, but it forms small pockets of sulfides and oxides during treatments, which sulfides and oxides of different elements which can further be used for nucleation purpose. These particles settle on the shell formed during the treatment. So I'll explain you what are the different formations happening during the treatment in the subsequent slides. So after inoculation, These sulfides and oxides are utilized by the inoculating elements, which is added later to form compounds which further settles on the shell, which is formed during the treatment. So this is how the nucleation happens, and then growth happens continuously. A calm and gentle reaction helps to provide better conditions for subsequent nucleation. So when your reaction violence is very high, it starts disturbing the nuclei which is present already in the liquid metal. So our target or our aim should be such that we reduce the reaction violence and we reduce the vigorousness of the violence which happens. The treatment reactivity decides either the small sites are formed for further nucleation or large agglomerates of slag clusters are formed. So when you start getting very high reaction violence, it starts agitating the metal, and when you agitate the metal, lot of oxides are generated inside. As we know, there is aspiration of metal, like oxygen coming into the coming in contact with the liquid metal and start giving you agitation, and it start giving you more slag, more oxide slags. So there is a possibility that high treatment violence can lead to more oxygen influx and can lead to more slag formation, and can also destroy the nucleation which is getting formed. So why do you need a substrate or inoculation? So this will be a question or a difference between a gray and ductile and foundry. Gray and foundry, you just add a single treatment alloy, single inoculating element or a single alloy to get the final properties. And in ductile, why do I need to add two different alloys to get the final achievement? Why can't I do it with a single treatment alloy? So the answer for this is there are some ill effects due to the magnesium or magnesium treatment to the happening to the liquid metal. So we need to have some extra elements added to compensate that. So this is a table which talks of the compatibility, which talks of the different levels of formation of compounds and its compatibility with the graphite. So it is like there is a shell which is formed out of magnesium silicate. So these are formed during the magnesium treatment. So when you see which is that nodalizer, which is the source of is from nodalizer, these two phases are formed from the magnesium treatment. The other phases which is highlighted in green color are either from inoculant or also from nodalizer, like cerium and lanthanum from nodalizer also. And there are inoculant varieties which has got cerium and lanthanum. So these form the substrate. So there are two formations like shell formation and substrate formation. So we'll discuss this later in the next slide, but this slide will be talking about the compatibility. So there is a graphite which is about to get precipitated from liquid metal as solid phase. So you need a platform on which graphite can sit, deposit and start growing. So there is a compatibility issue. So graphite is in the form of generally you get a hexagonal shape graphite, that is the crystal structure of graphite which is precipitating is hexagonal in nature, and you should have a counterpart which is compatible to it, like close to hexagonal shape. So the substrate has got a hexagonal shape which has got good compatibility, but the shell which is formed out of magnesium treatment is orthorhombic, which is less compatible. So lattice disk registry is a measure of the compatibility between two different crystal structures, and what standard says is that if it is less than 5%, it becomes favorable for the nucleation. That means graphite can precipitate on it and then start growing. If it is greater than 5%, then the tendency for graphite to precipitate on this keeps coming down. So this means that the magnesium silicate or shell formed out of magnesium treatment is not sufficient enough for the entire process to happen, like nodalization, graphite precipitation and growth. So you definitely need to have elements other than magnesium for graphite to precipitate and then grow. So this is the evidence why you need an inoculation on top of a magnesium treatment. So this is one of the theory, silicate theory, which talks of how the nucleation happens. So you have got liquid metal with oxygen and sulfur in it, and you do a magnesium treatment. You start introducing magnesium, cerium, lanthanum, calcium, silicon, aluminum, these elements from your treatment alloy into the liquid metal, and then you do a inoculation, and these elements get added to your liquid metal. So up to this stage, your entire process has got just liquid metal with these elements and interacting between each other, forming different compounds based on the affinity. So the first thing forming is a shell and a substrate which is next in color, and the core, the shell and the substrate. So the core is generally made out of magnesium or calcium sulfide, which is an effect of their magnesium treatment. Then the shell is formed out of magnesium silicate MgO.SiO in different combinations. So this is out of your magnesium treatment, and the substrate which is formed out of cerium, lanthanum, or your inoculating elements like calcium, strontium, barium. This is out of your magnesium treatment as well as inoculation. So as I had explained previously, if you just have the core and the core and shell, your graphite does not precipitate on top of it. It doesn't support in growing. So you definitely need to have substrate. That means you definitely need to have either of elements like cerium, lanthanum, or in your treatment alloy, or you should have a separate inoculation mechanism. So graphite precipitates on the substrate only and not on the shell during the solidification. So growth mechanisms. So there are this is the graphite. So it is a two-dimensional. I have given a pictorial representation of a graphite. So there are two. This is the good way, like the nodalizer forming way. Sorry, the round nodule formation way. You have got graphite and oxysulfide nuclei. The nuclei growth happens on the basal plane, that is the C-axis plane. So graphite starts sticking one on top of the other, and further graphite precipitation happens one over the other, and this gets stacked and then it grows in the spiral form, and finally leading to a round nodule formation. But there is the other way, which we talk of the faded nodule, or what we call as poor magnesium, the effect of poor magnesium treatment. So it has got the graphite and excess oxygen and sulfur. The culprits are excess oxygen and sulfur. When you have more treatment violence, we told we will be getting more oxygen. And when your metal is held for a long time, you get more oxygen and sulfur. And your scrap material or your input materials are have got these impurities in it, it will start giving more oxygen and sulfur. When you hold the metal for longer time in your furnace, you start getting more oxygen. Sulfur is out of your charge materials like your coke, your pig iron, your returns, or your scrap can to some extent can contain sulfur. Then this excess sulfur and oxygen has got affinity towards this the prismatic plane. It is like adsorption. When you have more oxygen and sulfur present, you have got one graphite which is precipitated. Before the next graphite could precipitate on top of it, this oxygen and sulfur excess present in the material, which is not reacted with any of the elements you have added, will start getting attached to the graphite already precipitated. So between two graphites you have got oxygen and sulfur. So this makes the side plane more favorable for the graphite to precipitate than the top plane or the basal plane. So this way the next graphite getting attached will be on these two sides. So it starts giving this kind of A-axis growth. So you end up in getting this vermichlorion. So the difference between the left and the right, the round nodule and the uh, vermicular type graphite is just the excess oxygen and sulfur. And if this oxygen sulfur is left over with unreacted, or left over uncombined, start giving you vermicularion. So this is why care to be taken that there should not be any excess sulfur left over, there should not be any excess oxygen produced inside the metal during processing, so as that you add all the elements such that it combines and forms compounds which is favorable for the nucleation. So from now on, we'll be discussing about the misconceptions, like the different understandings of selection and usage of a nodalizer. So major elements in a nodalizer and its variants. So we have talked about the elements present. We'll be talking about the variants, like the amount of elements present. So these are some of the variants present in the Indian industries, like magnesium varying from 5 to 10% in different ranges, like 5 to 7, 6 to 8, 8 to 10, and rare earth ranging from 0.5% to 3%. There are people who buy nil rare earth grades, like who manufacture thick section windmill castings. They buy nil rare earth grades, and calcium ranges from 1% to 3%. As you want calcium to support magnesium, you have minimum 1% calcium. And there are some grades which is being manufactured or which is lesser than 5%, which is supplied to US and Canada. People or foundries there use low magnesium grades because of some pollution or their quality norms. There are some assumptions and conditions which lead the foundrymen to prefer high magnesium content in the nodalizers. So because of these reasons, people ask for high magnesium. They calculate that addition rates can be reduced if you have high magnesium in your alloy. since the addition rate is getting reduced, the treatment cost can be reduced is what the understanding. And variation in the process parameters can be met. That is, even if you try to have a less control on your process parameters, because you have a high magnesium, it will take care of all the conditions is what the understanding. And parameters like varying sulfur levels and different tapping temperatures, when you have a lesser control over tapping temperature from your furnace, your high magnesium content will take care by itself. And if you have varying pouring time, if your pouring time varies and you don't have a control or a lesser control, then high magnesium should by itself take care. Any excess sulfur from the mold. There are conditions in Fure and No-Bake system where there is a solid, there is a sand to metal interaction happening, where you get vermicular or flake graphite in the surface. They call it skin graphite, skin effect, sorry. And having high magnesium in the alloy can give high residual magnesium, and people expect that this to counter the excess sulfur effect from the mold. And thick sections in hot spots, there is a tendency that the nodularity can come down. So to avoid that, having high magnesium can counter this effect in the thick section. So these are the assumptions or the conditions where people start preferring high magnesium content in the nodulizers. So we'll go into the advantages of having high magnesium and the disadvantages of having it. So advantages. So as you have seen, the addition rate can be brought down. Yes, and you can manage with different sulfur levels. You can manage with various varying parameters or varying controls in your foundries. But the disadvantage is you have got very high magnesium activity. We know magnesium is a carbide promoting element, and you have got a very high magnesium activity. You start getting more violent reactions and you start losing your nucleation potential. Even though you add a lesser addition by weight, instead of adding 10 kg, you start adding 8 kg of high magnesium alloy. Still, it is an alloy with high magnesium. So the treatment violence will be more than the low magnesium alloy. So when your treatment violence is more, you start losing your potential of the metal. So when you have magnesium, high magnesium, and you have got a violent reaction, the slag generation can be high. So this can increase the carbides and shrinkage tendency in the casting, because you have got a lesser nucleation potential. Your carbide forming tendency or a shrinkage tendency in the casting keeps increasing. So based on this, you might have to add more inoculant to your metal. So why is high magnesium dangerous? So magnesium forms magnesium oxide and magnesium sulfide. When you have excess of this, you have got excess of MgO and MgS. You would have seen this white layer in the liquid in the treatment ladle after treatment, which is coated over the lining material. Those are MgO generally, which is of no use to us. So when you keep increasing your magnesium in your alloy, the generation of MgO is increased. It is directly proportional. The same way MgS. So some can talk of like magnesium sulfide going into the your core formation, but only a small amount of magnesium is required to combine with sulfur to form the core. The excess magnesium is again dangerous. It starts giving agitation, starts giving violent reaction. It goes out as starts to go out as vapors. So these two have got lower boiling points at the operating temperature, so they just go out as gases or get precipitated outside the liquid metal along the surface. So these are responsible for violence and flares. So only a small amount of MgS creates nucleation sites. Except for that, the other two, the excess of MgS and MgO has got no part in forming nucleation for graphitization. So if excess magnesium is dangerous, then how do people select an alloy for suitable application? So we've got general guidelines based on the different process variables and different process variables and controls in a foundry, and in what basis the constituents of your nodulator can be selected, like what levels of magnesium can be selected, what level of calcium and rare earth can be selected. So we have plotted against a sulfur, pouring temperature, treatment time, section thickness, tramp elements present, and the tapping temperature also. So out of this, we have generalized and we have taken the maximum alloy. The most selected combinations would be magnesium varying from 6 to 8%, and calcium ranging from 1 to 2%, and rare earth ranging from 2% max. That is the maximum. So it can be seen that this combination can support in most of the conditions which we are operating. So this case study will be discussing about the comparison of two different grades of light master alloy, ferrosilicon magnesium grades, and we'll be discussing its performance also. So this case study, this is the aim at studying the effect of high magnesium content in the alloy. There is an alternate low magnesium grade which is selected, which is slightly added at a higher addition rate than the existing high magnesium grade. So we have got case 1 and case 2. First case has got 8 to 10% magnesium grade, 1% calcium grade and 1% rare earth grade. Its addition rate is selected at 0.9%. Case 2 has got a 6 to 8% grade, lesser magnesium, calcium and rare earth at the same levels, but the higher addition rate 1.1%. These addition rates are to compensate the magnesium content only. So let us see the implications of these grades. So case 1, the higher magnesium grade, effectively magnesium seems to be higher, but when you talk of rare earth and calcium, the addition rate is reduced. Because rare earth and calcium is supporting, these are supporting ingredients to magnesium, but because of your lower addition rate, you are reducing this effectiveness also. But in case 2, you may get effectively lower magnesium, but higher TRE and calcium addition rate. So because of this higher calcium and TRE, you start getting more protection towards the loss. So when you talk of the loss in magnesium, it is lesser with the magnesium, low magnesium grade. It is because of the presence of this high amount of rare earth and calcium. But it is not available in case 1, where as you reduce magnesium, you reduce rare earth and calcium also. So the implications of it would be more reaction, more loss, and here the violent reaction will be less, and then magnesium loss will be comparatively lesser, and less nucleation potential due to presence of less TRE, and more MgO due to less calcium. But here you have got good protection from calcium and then good denucleation from rare earth. So these are experimental trials where so these grades are designated by SNAM. So these are our ferrosilicon magnesium grades, where we have got a 68% grade which is added at 1.1 compared with the 8 to 10% grade similar to the previous slide, compared at 1% at different grades. And the same way we have got 1% 68% magnesium with 1% rare earth, and here you have got 1% and 3% calcium with 1% rare earth. We have tried to keep the variables as less as possible. This study is to evaluate the performance of low magnesium variant against high magnesium variant and high TRE variant at a comparatively increased addition rate. So it is 10% more than what you add. So these experiments was conducted in 300 kg furnace. We have got SNAM R&D center has got 300 kg furnace attached to it, so we can conduct small scale experiments similar to foundries. So we poured a 500 bar 7 ductile iron. We tapped tapping temperature was close to 1530, 1535. We maintain 1520 to 1540 as tapping temperature, and it can be altered based on the requirements. And we did a Tundish cover treatment with the sandwich packing inside the treatment ladle, and we added 0.3% of inoculant, barium based inoculant in the treatment ladle during the cover, and on top of it we have had the covering scrap, which is 0.8 to 1 ratio with the ferrosilicon magnesium addition rate. And the second stage inoculation was the same inoculant at 0.15% addition during the transfer. We poured up to 8 minutes, and the 8th minute sample had we poured 1 inch Y block, the standard Y block, which is 25 mm section thickness, and we have poured micro samples from AFS coupon, and we have taken samples from it for analysis. So these are the results, the data which is obtained during comparison between 2% rare earth grade and 3% rare earth grade with two different magnesium levels. When you see these results, you have got the adequate amount of residual magnesium. The residual magnesium by number is lesser than the other two results, but this is sufficient enough for a good ductile iron to be produced. And when you see, even at this level, you have got a 90% nodularity, 90 to 100% nodularity at two different section thickness, and the nodule count is at par, is equivalent to the other grades. And the same way, all the mechanical properties and the minimum requirements are met, such that there is no deviation because of the change of the alloy or the increase in addition rate over the mechanical properties, which is essential for the casting. And these are the microstructure results which has given the previous numbers. So here we see the nodal distribution, the nodularity looks similar when compared to all three grades. And this is a 1% rare earth grade where we have compared the different magnesium levels and different calcium levels. So here again you have got slightly lesser residual magnesium in number, but that doesn't matter because I should not tell it doesn't matter because it is it is insignificant when you compare the properties achieved. So metallurgical properties and mechanical properties are met even at the lowest residual magnesium which is obtained. So these are the microstructural comparisons between the different grades and trials, the results obtained out of the trials. So what do we infer from these trials and results are, there is no need to go for high magnesium variant 8 to 10% when you have your rare earth and calcium in your alloy more than 1% each. So that means if your the understanding is that you need not go for high magnesium every time. You can increase your calcium content or you can increase your rare earth content to get a better performance, or when you feel like you have to switch over to a different grade of nodalizer rather than increasing magnesium. Calcium and rare earth levels can be 1 to 2% max. 2% max is sufficient enough to ensure and produce good ductile and properties throughout the castings. So low magnesium variant produces similar results when added in excess by 10%, that is 1.1% against 1% of high magnesium variant. So the increase in addition rate is just 10% of it. So in the Indian context, as we had discussed, seen in the previous slides also, nodalizer with 68% magnesium, rare earth 2% max and calcium 2% max is the most advisable and safe treatment alloy to produce ductile and castings without any ill effects on the quality. So just brush up on what we have seen throughout the presentation. So we have gone through various types of nodalizer and the different constituents of a nodalizer, and we have seen the role of individual elements present in the nodalizer. We have seen the effect of nodalizer on the nucleation, what does the nodalizer do, and the need for inoculation, why do we need to inoculate during ductile ion treatment or after ductile ion treatment in the ductile ion manufacture process. We have seen that, and we have seen some guidelines, broad guidelines on selection of nodalizers for the suitable processes. And we have seen the ill effects of high magnesium containing nodalizer grades, why the bad effects of having high magnesium in your nodalizer. We have seen the typical case study on different nodalizer grades comparing its performance with different magnesium levels and rare earth levels. So the ultimate aim should be, or what should we be looking at, is have a suitable nodalizer with its lowest dangerous constituents like magnesium and rare earth, which can be preferred over nodalizer which yields you low addition rates, because low addition is just quantity, weight by weight, or then you can multiply it into the price and then make it as a cost. But low constituents, like low dangerous constituents, means quality. So you ultimately look into the quality of casting what is being produced. So hope everyone are quality conscious and quality intensive rather than the price or cost intensive over castings. So what should be the target of an efficient foundry? So to achieve uniform and acceptable microstructure with optimum magnesium addition with the maximum magnesium recovery or yield treatment process. So when you compare these three results, process A and process C still gives the similar nodularity, but process A has been produced with a high magnesium alloy with a high residual magnesium. Process C is produced with a low magnesium alloy with the minimum residual magnesium required. So if you have a good control, or unless or otherwise required, we need not go for a high magnesium alloy. We can still manage with the low magnesium alloy, and here and there small tweaking in the process and improvements. So we finally come to the end of the presentation. So thank you all for being patient and listening to the entire presentation, and I'll be getting into the question answer sessions and the queries asked during the webinar. These are the following questions asked during the sessions. The first question was, how and why is the reaction violence during magnesium treatment affecting the nucleation? As we have explained previously, reaction violence starts disturbing the nuclei which is present along with which comes along with your liquid metal. Your liquid metal has got its own potency. That means, for example, your 30 or 40% of nucleation comes from your liquid metal, your base metal itself, and extra 60% it gets added due to the additional alloys which we do, like magnesium treatment and inoculation. So when your reaction valence is more, you start killing the 30 or 40% you get from your liquid metal itself. So magnesium treatment is dangerous in that way. Also, magnesium treatment is violent and it agitates. So this can reduce the stability of the nuclei which is getting formed, or it can let too many nuclei coagulate to form a coarser nuclei. That way the number of nuclei comes down, so the effect of total nucleation is reduced. Also, when you have more of violence, so more agitation, more oxygen and more sulfur, more slag generation. So elements which are present or which we tend to add to the liquid metal are oxidizing and desulfurizing in nature. So when your agitation is more, you start losing these elements more in the form of oxides or sulfates, which can get attached to the slag and go off. So in reaction violence, it not just affects your magnesium recovery, it also affects your nucleation front. Nodule is, the second question is, nodule is seen as two-dimensional round structure under optical microscope, and why not as hexagonal structures? So, so these are finer crystallographic lattices, crystallographic structures, which is to be seen under high magnification microscopes like scanning electron microscope or transmission electron microscope. A conventional optical microscope which has got say up to 500x or up to 1000x, we might not be able to see these hexagonal structures because these are ultra fine structures. So you might have to go to a scanning electron microscope or a transmission electron microscope. The next question is, for liquid metal weight above 750 kg, which treatment process is better, sandwich method or a cold wire process? So the process selection of magnesium treatment should be based on the process, the foundry conditions, particularly the layout of the foundry and the controls they want or the controls they have existing. So either of these two processes have or use the same material, and it depends on what the foundry suits, what the foundry selects. In India, the most prevalent method is sandwich method, and sandwich method and cold wire method have got their own advantages and disadvantages. Like cold wire process, we've got a good control over the addition rate, and but the process is costly, and the entire layout is controlled by the cold wire setup, where you have got a separate setup. You have to move your ladle there, do a treatment, and then take it off, and then take it to your pouring ladle. So your entire process flow is designed or to be designed based on this cold wire, but it is not present in sandwich. And again, the cost of maintenance of having a sandwich treatment method and a cold wire process is different. So it is up to the foundry to select either of these methods, but the same material, the same nodulizer is put into use in both of these methods. So it doesn't matter based on the cold wire process or this. And there are cold wire process with pure magnesium also. Two-stage inoculation. The next question is two-stage inoculation process. Why to add an inoculant in the treatment ladle? So as we have seen, the entire target during treatment is to safeguard magnesium. So you already have too much of deoxidizing elements in your treatment alloy such that it safeguards magnesium. So your inoculation or your inoculant also contains deoxidizing elements. So when you add this inoculant to your treatment ladle, you're again supporting your magnesium recovery. This is first point. Second point is, during magnesium treatment, either it is a less violent or more violent treatment, you still kill your nuclei, because there is some amount of violence going to happen, which is going to happen. So which is about the amount of loss which is going to happen can be compensated by the treatment alloy. Also, this works like a cover alloy. So we have got covering scrap which is added to the ductile iron treatment, which delays the liquid metal interaction with the treatment material like the magnesium alloy. So when you have one more material on top of it, it starts reducing your or delaying your magnesium treatment process. And the next thing is your metal will get inoculated first and then magnesium treatment. Magnesium treated next. When your metal gets inoculated first, some of the oxygen is taken by the inoculant. So you have less oxygen available for magnesium, so you get the best results out of your magnesium treatment. So this is how having a inoculant as a cover alloy or a specially designed cover alloy for the treatment alloy is helping. So how to reduce skin effect through FESA MG alloy in the casting? Um, FESA MG alloy modification to solve this problem might not be a right solution. See, skin effect is because of the mold metal interaction or the chemical reaction between sulfur in your mold and magnesium in your liquid metal. So when, as we have seen, magnesium when it reacts with sulfur and it is not available for nodulization to form, or the compounds which was formed during a treatment gets disturbed due to sulfur which is getting introduced due to your metal, so introduced due to your mold, is the effect of is due to is the cause for the skin effect. And increasing or changing the FeSAMG alloy will give you overall change to the liquid metal, but might not subdue this skin effect. So the first attack, the first step to be taken to counter the skin effect is prevent the liquid metal interaction with the mold. So there are coatings available. I've heard people making coatings over this Furan molds or no-bake molds, such that it acts like a barrier between this metal and then mold, so no reaction happens, and you don't get the skin effect, or you reduce the tendency for the skin effect. So, but if you start changing your FeSAMG alloy just to counter the skin effect, it can also affect the other parts of the casting, which already has got good nodularity, or you start giving more magnesium to your other parts of the casting, which is dangerous. So FeSAMG alloy is not the direct solution for skin effect. Can inoculant be used as a covering material? As I have discussed previously, yes, inoculant can be used as a covering material, but the intention of covering material is to delay the magnesium reaction. So when you have steel as a covering material, steel has got a very high melting temperature than our normal operating temperatures. So steel takes some time and for dissolution and takes away some heat. So steel starts becoming mushy, and that mushy layer does not let magnesium vapors to go through. So you retain magnesium inside your liquid metal. So it doesn't yield or doesn't melt immediately. But when you have inoculant as a cover alloy, inoculant has got a lesser melting point, so it can readily dissolve. But the advantage of having inoculant as a covering material is you get good nuclei, your oxidizing nature of inoculant becomes helpful. You don't let magnesium get lost as magnesium oxide. So inoculant is not a 100% replacement or cannot be a 100% replacement for the cover alloy, but yes, you can replace some extent of covering scrap with inoculating material. If silicon is a supporting element for nucleation, why high silicon in magnesium, will high silicon in magnesium alloy can support in nucleation as well? Yes, to some extent having, see the light master alloy, if you talk of, it has got silicon designed in the range of say 40 to 50 or 43 to 50%. So that is designed to counter the ill effects of magnesium, but with pure magnesium it is absent. Pure magnesium alloy, pure magnesium doesn't contain the silicon. That is why pure magnesium treatments are generally carbadic in nature, so it demands more inoculating, or it requires a post processing of the treatment after the casting. So there are people who do pure magnesium treatment will have to have good control over inoculation practice, where a slight change can lead to carbide formation or more carbide formation. So high silicon to some extent supports, which is already present in your master alloy. So hope that should be sufficient enough for your entire nucleation process. So magnesium to sulfur relationship with respect to shrinkage tendency in the metal. So the standard or overall general practice talks of having a magnesium to sulfur relationship in the range of say 3:1 or 4:1 should be sufficient enough, or people maintain that. But what experts tell is when excess magnesium is present, it can lead to microporosities or shrinkages in hot spots. So care to be taken that you do not increase your residual magnesium or have your magnesium, residual magnesium in the metal more than required. So magnesium and sulfur relationship is for the for desulfurizing or countering the effect of sulfur to produce bad or irregular graphite shapes. So that could also have an effect on the shrinkage tendency. Then the next question is, any coatings available with SNAM to avoid skin effect? Right now we have our product portfolio limits us up to only ferrosilicon, magnesium and inoculants. We haven't worked on having coatings from SNAM to avoid skin effect. This could be a futuristic project for us also. Typical foundry conditions. So in a condition where you have got a 10 to 12%, 10 to 12 minutes pouring, last minute nodularity is 75 to 80%, 6 to 8% magnesium alloy is being used. Can this be switched to an 8 to 10% magnesium alloy? So this is what we have been discussing in the last slides, sir. So this is the case where you can work on controlling or finding out the root cause for this loss happening to your nodularity. Is it just because of the magnesium or handling of this magnesium alloy, like your variation in the process parameter which has let this magnesium get lost and then reduce nodularity? Or you can work on increasing or altering your other ingredients in your nodulizer, like calcium content or your rare earth content, where your you still get 90% nodularity with the same residual magnesium. So this increase in magnesium is not required directly or may not be required. So to get into further details, you may write to us. You may write to us, and then we'll work on solution with you. Is the shrinkage in the casting composition dependent? Yes, the entire solidification behavior is decided by the composition of the material, any alloy for that matter. So the same way, ductile also is composition dependent. So the composition features carbon equivalent and then other alloying elements which control the matrix. And these carbon equivalent and alloying elements are to be selected such that you get sound castings for the particular section thicknesses. So composition matters a lot in controlling the shrinkage during solidification. So we have come to the end of the webinar, and thank you all for patiently listening to us. And for any further inquiries or queries, please write to us and visit us at snam.co.in, and happy learning. Thank you.